A Vote for Debra is the 20th episode of Season 6 of Everybody Loves Raymond. This is directed by Zaks, and as always, there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode chronologically and share some thoughts. It's maybe not the funniest episode. By no means do I dislike it. I think it's a solid episode that raises some interesting points. It's definitely not a favourite, but ultimately I still enjoyed it. And it starts off with Ray getting the kids to bed, and then Debra comes home from a meeting, and it turns out that people at the school want her to run for president of the school governing board. She's quite excited about this. Ray is frazzled from putting the kids to bed for one night, and he's concerned that Debra will be out at meetings a lot. He doesn't really want her to do this. He's clearly not supporting her. And that's kind of the main theme of the episode. We're then at a potluck at the school, and we meet Debra's opponent. This is Bill Parker, played by David Hunt. And Ray is his usual awkward self. The scene was maybe a little slow. I mean, it might not have been that slow if I'd found it funnier. But for me, I didn't get a lot out of this scene. So maybe it wasn't too slow if I'd liked it more. But it was fine. It was not a bad scene. It was very clear that Ray was not taking this seriously. And understandably, Debra was not very happy about that. We're then back at the house with Ray, Frank, Marie, and Robert. And it's a nice enough scene. Everybody's in a decent enough mood. But then the mood drops because Debra comes home and we find out that she lost. And understandably, she's disheartened, but they comfort her. She seems to come around to it not being the end of the world. And then Ray says something. And Ray says that it was good that she lost by 6. It would have been worse if she'd lost by 1 vote. And actually, I think maybe this says more about me, I don't know, but I think Debra was very quick to jump to a certain accusation. Because I feel like, for me, that would be worse. I'd rather lose by a couple than by 1. Being 1 vote away would feel worse because it would have been so close. It would have been just in Debra's reach, and just one person's decision changed that. Whereas if several people didn't vote for her, I feel like, in a way, that would feel better because she was not that close to it. And I feel like that could have been Debra's takeaway from this. But immediately, she asked Ray, who did you vote for? And Debra very clearly had jumped to the conclusion that Ray was relieved it wasn't just 1 vote, because then it would have been his fault. Then Ray would have been to blame, because, as Debra is assuming, Ray didn't vote for her. And actually, quite quickly, Ray reveals that, yeah, he didn't vote for her. Which I have to say is, well, Debra's allowed to be outraged by that, and it's unusual for Debra to be dramatic, and understandably so. I think often Debra overreacts to situations, but on this occasion, I'm Team Debra. It was not a good thing for Ray to do. He should have supported her no matter what, and I think it's very obvious that he didn't support her for selfish reasons. And you know Ray is in the wrong when even Marie cannot stay in the room and try and defend him. She leaves, Robert leaves, Frank leaves, and says that Ray is a dead man. Even they're outraged by what Ray has done. And then, obviously, Ray and Debra get into an argument, and Ray's excuse is that he was protecting her against political backstabbing, which is obviously BS. And then Debra said that she was so disgusted with his behaviour that she denied knowing him at the potluck. And that makes things a little bit more level. I'm not saying that what Debra did, in my opinion, is worse than what Ray did. Maybe it is, I'm not sure. I'm not saying it definitely isn't, but certainly I'd say they're both equal. Ray very clearly did not support Debra, but to deny knowing your own husband, that's pretty low. Even for Debra with Ray's behaviour, I think that was a low thing to do. And Ray pointed out that Debra makes it seem like he's not good enough for her. And that's when Debra realises that she's clearly done something wrong as well. And I think the pacing of the argument was great. They could have stretched it out a bit longer if they wanted to, but I think it moved forward quite quickly. Sometimes with arguments in Raymond, the argument will be pretty level throughout the entire scene, and it's just the same person shouting and shouting and shouting, and there's no resolution within that scene. But with this one, it was much more of a roller coaster. It felt a lot more natural. Not that I have any problem with how they usually argue, but with this one, I think we had different arguments or different sides to the argument given quite equal weight, and I thought it worked really, really well. It was very well written. And I think the facial expressions throughout were great as they were each responding to each other, particularly when they both realised that what they'd done wasn't exactly a great thing. Debra apologises first, Ray then apologises straight away, and everything is going really, really well. And then there's a phone call from Bill, who of course won the election, and he wants Debra's help, which I thought was really lovely. I thought that was really sweet of him. And that's assuming he doesn't make her do all of the busy work and he just gets to be the face of all of the glory. I'm assuming he will let her take credit where credit is due. And obviously Debra's thrilled by this. And at that moment, one of the twins comes downstairs and says that they've had an accident. So Ray has to go and deal with that, which is what he wanted to try and avoid. But at the end of the day, he is the twins' parent. He still has to help out. It's not all about Debra putting the kids to bed. It should be more 50-50. And I think it's only reasonable that Debra gets to do something for herself, as Ray often does for himself. And I thought it was a nice way to end things. The final scene, I didn't really care for. We were back at the school. Ray was behaving the way he usually does, and it was fine. I didn't dislike it, but I feel like the final scene would have been, well, the penultimate scene would have been a better final scene, but it was fine. I didn't mind it. As I said, this might not be the funniest episode. I don't think I've really pointed out anything that I found to be particularly funny. I guess Debra, or rather Marie, Frank and Robert's reactions, the way Marie, Frank and Robert responded when they realised what Ray had done, I don't think that was necessarily funny. I didn't laugh at it, but it was mildly amusing. Whereas there are plenty of Raymond episodes where I'm hysterically laughing. So this one for me definitely wasn't as funny, but I do think it addresses some really important points. I think there could be some really great elements of relatability if you are the Ray or the Debra. And I think it does show how not to handle those situations, which is a really brilliant takeaway. So in general, not a bad episode. Really enjoyed it. Maybe not the funniest, but nevertheless, a vote for Debra. It's still a solid episode of Everybody Loves Raymond.